Spinning wheels, spinning hedgehogs, and spinning balls. It's February 2002, and this is Yesterzine. An exciting new year of gaming dawns. The PS2 has just had its first unchallenged Christmas in the UK, having technically had to fight the remains of the Dreamcast the previous year. Just to Gatling gun that wound, Sony announced their 10 millionth PlayStation 2 sold on the day Sega announced their exit from hardware. GTA 3 is out. Metal Gear Solid 2 is out. Sony are on a roll and have seen off every machine launched before the PS2. But as we open Games Master issue 117, the real battle is starting. The other traditional challenger, Nintendo, had got something of a bloody nose, with its lack of storage being a major problem for the cartridge-based N64. So they're reacting with the GameCube, whose cute little optical discs have a quarter of the storage of the other two. Fabulous. The Cube, though, is cheap. The PS2 is still £300, a number that sounds positively utopian in 2026. But Nintendo will be launching their baby in May at just £129. And while Nintendo goes for cuteness and cheapness, opting out of a straight power fight in a manner that continues to this day, Microsoft have built a beast. The also £299 Xbox One, not to be confused with the later Xbox One, uses PC-derived components with a custom Pentium-based CPU and NVIDIA GeForce graphics chip. In that respect, it set the template for all console gaming a quarter of a century later. But its greatest strength would be its greatest weakness. Relying on commodity components like this, Microsoft struggled to make it cheaper, and while it gave them a foothold, it also took them less than 4 years to replace it. For other reasons, the Cube's replacement wouldn't take much longer. Conversely, the PS2 wasn't replaced for over 7 years in the UK, and was in production for a total of nearly 14. Sega's year-old decision to get out of hardware is about to start paying dividends for the other three. The last Dreamcast games are imminent, and then it's all about third party. The Xbox would get Jet Set Radio and Sega GT, the PlayStation 2 some lovely Sega arcade conversions, and the Cube was the spiritual, if not exclusive, home of upcycled Dreamcast Sonic games. It's the other kid on the block that's getting Sega's high-profile attention here though. After its predecessor battled Sega, Atari, Bandai and NEC for handheld supremacy, the 7-month-old Game Boy Advance has the market largely to itself. It was considered so separate from everything else, Microsoft and Sony both allowed what were otherwise console-exclusive series to receive entries on it. Sega went further though. This month, the GBA will get the first proper Sonic game to debut outside a Sega machine. But it's going to run smack bang into the platform owner trying to remind them who's boss. The first true Sonic vs Mario battle is right here. Elsewhere, one of Sony's flagship series is back with another game after only a year. And it's possibly the most controversial game in the series for more than one reason. Does it deserve the review Games Master are about to give it? But first, despite everything I said earlier, maybe the GBA does have handheld competition. And the call is coming from inside the house.
As Nintendo begins to take on new forms, it's important that we can measure how addictive they truly are.
This is a Game Boy Micro. It's a tiny version of the Game Boy Advance, playing Game Boy Advance games. It holds the distinction of technically being the last Game Boy, launching after the original version of the DS. It didn't do super well. The compromises were probably too great. The screen is nice, but it's also only 2 inches.
Yeah, but it's what you do with it that counts.
Which is also a slight problem, because what you can't do with it is play Game Boy and Game Boy Color games, something the also available Game Boy SP could do. Said SP was also 20 bones cheaper. Other, lesser shows will call it Nintendo's smallest ever multi-cartridge handheld, and if they do, feel free to throw a NES cartridge at them because they'll have done the reading Wikipedia thing again. You will, as a discerning viewer, have noted the 2005 release of the GBM probably doesn't make it the machine Games Master are talking about. This is the answer to both questions, the Nintendo Pokémon Mini, a handheld small in every sense. It's marginally smaller than the Micro overall, the carts are the cutest thing in the village, and as Games Master points out, small in price too. At the time of writing, it was only available from Nintendo's New York Megastore, but it would launch the next month in the UK at 40 quid, with the games at under a tenner. A decade of advancement since the Game Boy was 40 quid meant the Mini is not short on features. Nintendo's own retrospective site points out it has inbuilt rumble, not seen on another Nintendo handheld until the Switch. It's not even just that. It's got a shock sensor in, and a primitive version of the Wii's movement detection, which allows you to shake the machine in some games. It also has a clock, which the GBA does not. And they can talk to each other via IR to do multiplayer. At this point, I remind you that this episode is fully subtitled, and if you were, for instance, to mute it for the next few minutes, you would miss no actual dialogue. Just remember I said that. The games are all Pokemon related. For instance, Pokemon Party Mini is a collection of mini-games, some multiplayer. A lot of them rely on the motion sensing that doesn't work so well on an emulator, so here's 3 that don't. Rocket Start, where you simply wait for the system to rumble and then press a button to start the race. I have yet to win it. The time required is under 0.3 of a second. Slowking's Judge, where you're, of all things, a tennis umpire. Balls will come at you quicker than your mum trying to score 40 to love. You press B if they're in, A if they're out. It seems like the easiest thing in the world, but somehow it's also easy to make a mistake, especially once the balls abandon the concept of physics. And how about Chansey's Dribble, a simple time-based game where you boot an oversized football up a path in the quickest possible time? All lovely things. A very decent little cart. Additional games involve Velocum, Hitmonchan and Sneasel. It's a point in the system's favour that the games aren't going straight for the obvious heavy hitter Pokemon. That said, Electric Mouse is front and centre in Pokemon Pinball Mini, a game that appears to have approximately Psyduck all to do with pinball. Using Diglett, you Pokeball into the arena, hoping to get one down each of the holes before the time limit expires. Directing the ball is not an easy task. Diglett, bless him, is not a precision instrument, but the simple control scheme works fairly well. Pokemon Zany Cards is the exact opposite, in that it's the least simple thing in the universe. A 3-player card game against CPU or humans, the basic idea is to match Pokemon cards. But there's also points for assembling a set and evolving, and for arbitrary combinations that make no sense to anyone. Somehow I still won. I suspect if you understood this and played against a human, it could be pretty good. On a machine filled with games younger humans would enjoy, it does stand out because your average preteen won't get this and won't want to. Puzzle Collection is easier. It looks like a sliding block puzzle, but there's no sliding. On each screen you swap tiles to complete a picture of a Pokemon. In level 1 this is a nice chill experience as you put together a little animated Poliwhirl. Then you get to level 2 and it's some kind of chilling Escher remember it at 3 AM nightmare. Like Zany Cards, the tiny 96x64 resolution of the system makes it tricky. Trying to put together an octillery made up of very few lines while they're all moving and there's no pixels left to keep the boundaries easily visible is something of a trial. It takes me the best part of quarter of an hour. And then I see this.
No.
That said, it's a compelling little set of carts on a gorgeous machine. These 4 got released in the US with the console, Party Mini being a pack-in for those folks. Unfortunately, they were both the launch lineup and the last Pokemon minigames released in the US. Europe got a 5th, Pokemon Tetris, which smacks of desperation a bit. And I'm showing you Tetris because it's safer than the remaining 5 Japanese exclusives, Puzzle Collection 2, Race Mini, Pichu Brothers Mini, Togepi's Great Adventure, and most disturbingly of all, hardcore pornography title Pokemon Breeder Mini.
At least, I presume that's what it was.
My habit of buying literally everything means I'm lucky enough to own one, and 3 of the 4 launch games, missing only Pokemon Party Mini. They're not easy to get hold of now, of course, and frankly I can't suggest you do for the price. It's a shame though. I reckon they'd have done much better if they'd waited until the Pokemon craze had fully taken hold to launch it. For proof, witness the success of Pokemon Go before they started using your data to help guide military drones. As you will have noticed though, it's an easy to emulate machine, and I fully recommend you investigate at least Party and Puzzle just for the novelty of there being a Nintendo handheld you might not even have heard of before this segment. I though need to move on to talk about the exact opposite side of the 2002 technology spectrum. What would you consider the biggest Sony series? The one that defines their format, that's been ever present and has transcended even game culture. It's not Wipeout, that wasn't Sony proper and they appeared to forget it existed about a decade ago. Tekken's Namco, and appears on other formats these days. It's certainly not Parappa the Rapper, more's the pity. I'm suggesting it's Gran Turismo. It changed a genre when it came out. It's had a new original entry on every single Sony console, assuming we let GT7 get away with being technically cross-gen. GT Academy laid the groundwork for sim racers to genuinely become successful real-life racers. And then they made a film about it, in which somehow the most authentically racing-involved person on screen was Jerry Bloody Halliwell.
This is absolutely not the time to go into that situation.
But here's the thing, they're not all winners. An aside to explain some Yesterzine lore to the newcomers. Amiga Power once said 73% was the lowest mark you could give a game before you got an angry phone call from the PR people asking what you were playing at by, well, playing it. And the thing is, if you go and look at 73% reviews, they are often suspicious. They're, if you like this sort of thing, you'll like this. Or read that the reviewer played it for 20 minutes, if at all. We did a series a few years back called the 73% Trials, where we held these reviews accountable for their crimes. About half of them were found guilty. And putting those things together, there's a Gran Turismo game reviewed in this issue of Games Master, and it gets 73%. The key here is that the mainline GT games, 1 through 7, are not the only Gran Turismo games. We're not even talking here about the de facto mainline games Gran Turismo Sport on PS4 and Gran Turismo on PSP. What we're talking about here isn't even one game, it's 3, and America got releases of none of them. Gran Turismo Concept, 2001 Tokyo, 2002 Tokyo Seoul, and 2002 Tokyo Geneva. Unlike later Gran Turismo Prologue titles, which were test releases for forthcoming major games, or more confusingly, one called HD Concept that was supposed to be but wasn't, the concept here is not Gran Turismo's. Instead, it refers to the slightly batshit cars that manufacturers produce for car shows to indicate their future direction. Some, like the Renault 5, make it to production almost unaltered, and some are basically the Homer. The 3 titles refer to 3 real motor shows, and alongside a small selection of regular cars from Gran Turismo 3, the game will feature some of these concept cars for you to drive. There are plenty of fabulous concept cars in the game. The Cadillac Sienne, the Dome Zero, and Honda's bizarre looking dual note. Which is what makes it weird the only car given any prominence in the intro is the Mercedes SL500, a perfectly lovely execu coupe, but one that was already a year old at this point, the 5th generation of the car, and is the most common model in the SL range. And no surprise, it's what you use for the first license test. Oh yeah, license tests. Even in what you're soon to realise is quite a cut down Gran Turismo, you're still going to have license tests. There is at least no drive 100 metres in a straight line bollocks here. This time the premise is very simple. To qualify to race on a circuit, in this case Midfield Raceway, you simply do a single lap of it in a very reasonable target time. Even having accidentally selected shandy drinking mode, I cruise through this one with 5 seconds to spare, and even get to unlock a car for my troubles, although again, it's not a concept car. Which is another way the game is a lot simpler than your average Gran Turismo. There's no buying cars here, new or otherwise. You get them for license test medals and race wins. And even to begin with, you've got a decent amount of choice. Because that's what this game is. It's the so-called arcade mode from the other Gran Turismos slightly fleshed out into something with a hint of progression. Unlock the track, race the track, win some car, race the car. This exposes a flaw of the game. Like all PS1 and 2 versions of Gran Turismo, races are against a maximum of 5 opponents. Gran Turismo has always been a driving sim, not a racing one to be fair. I will also concede it's better than the newer game's insistence on starting everyone half a mile apart and making everyone 5 seconds a lap slower than you. It's taken them until the recent expansion to GT7 to even consider fixing this. Even so, 5 opponents was tight in 1998 when GT1 came out, and by the PS2 it was faintly comical. Which is the point we should confess a minor cheat here. Games Master is reviewing Gran Turismo Concept, aka 2001 Tokyo, the first and Japanese-only version of the title. I'm playing the last and only UK release, Tokyo Geneva. The only difference though is the car lineup. For some reason we lose a pair of Nissans from the Japanese version and 2 Hyundais from the Middle Korea-based title. But we gain a lot more cars than we lose, including several of the concept cars from the 2002 Geneva show, like that Dome, but also the ultimate children's bedroom poster car, the Honda Jazz.
It's well fit. 3 car nerds just lost their shit at that joke.
But it doesn't fundamentally change the mass of the review, so why do Games Master choose to give it the mark of the beast? Well, they frame it as nickel and diming, contrasting the release against the collector's editions in other media, ultimately asking the perfectly sensible question, so if this is a half-sized rehash of a game that half the world has already got, why make GT Concept at all? Their answer is cuteness and weirdness. The game does deliver in that vein. Its one exclusive track also has an exclusive car, with the bizarre Toyota Pod being the only car available at the Pod Race circuit, which is an adapted form of the front straight and pits of Special Stage Route 5. Weirdly, the parent track does not appear in this game, although it's part of what turns out to be quite a lot of content hidden on the disc. It's an entertaining side diversion, but that's the extent of it. It fails to distract from the game only having 5 other tracks plus their reverse versions, all taken from Gran Turismo 3. That Autumn Ring is here, but Autumn Ring isn't, feels especially tight. And even with normal and professional modes for the races giving you half a chance of your skill matching a small field, it's not going to be anything close to the obsession the other games will be. Conversely though, it's also £25 new, when the RRP of a full GT was £45. Of course, by this point, Special Reserve would do you the full GT3 for £35 and the Platinum range was imminent. Hilariously, Concept would eventually also get a Platinum release, knocking a whole £5 off the price. And to that end, the situation is unclear. At the time, this does rather scream 7 out of 10. It's less intimidating than the big GT, it doesn't need to own your life. It's the one your 7-year-old might end up using as a gateway drug. Given the tracks were already made and they were charging a not insubstantial amount for this absolutely insubstantial game, you feel they could have given you a little bit more. I've seen accusations of this being a cover disc demo in disguise, and while that's unfair, it's not very unfair. Ultimately, I have to find Games Master semi-guilty on this one. It's still GT, but you can finish this £25 game in a day, and you could buy GT3 for not a lot more and only play arcade mode, even if that would result in you missing out on the Toyota Pod. It does feel the magazine has chickened out of giving it a kicking because, well, it's Gran Turismo, innit? Interestingly though, when it got a UK release they reviewed it again, and somehow gave it 85%, which seems even dafter when surely you'd have been able to buy the real thing for the same price by then. It's basically standalone DLC, and at £25 it's an expensive and pretty thin one. It does make you wonder if there was a bit of pressure to market well, and the classic 73% was some sort of protest by reviewer Alex Cook. Maybe the shyster who gave the same thing a full 12% more 6 months later should have a word with him. Let's see who that was. Hang on. That said, in 2026 the maths is a bit different. If you want to buy it, the store I will never call anything other than CEX will charge you £2.50 for a copy. And while that's the same as GT3, that now feels okay. If you've never been into the behemoth of a life-sucking career mode that is the big Gran Turismos and just want to dick around in some cars, it's great. The license tests plus races give you a measure of game progression, and the license test golds give you something to aim for. If you've never played a GT, this is one of the easier to recommend. The cover disc demo of release made good then, unlike Alex, who I sentenced to do one of the 24-hour races in Gran Turismo 4. In a Citroën 2CV. Sega versus Nintendo was the original console rivalry, and if, like my stats suggest, is likely, we're both a certain age, it's the one we all remember. The thing is though, it didn't really last that long. The NES and Master System both first found their way into the UK in 1987. The Master System was, and remained, well out in front, as we saw last month, whereas the 16-bit battle would ultimately be a lot closer. Even so, the two-horse race ended with the PlayStation's debut in 1995, just 8 years later. Of course, those 8 years were, for those of us in the first generation who grew up with mainstream video games, the years where we were formed. The console arguments, at least in the first half of that time period, rather paled in comparison to the computer ones. But they were there. And in the first half of the 90s, as the computers faded a little, Mega Drive vs SNES was almost as tribal. Even though there'd been a rapidly increasing amount of irrelevant for half a decade before it, Sega's 2001 announcement that they were getting out of hardware was a huge shock, even though their transition to third party meant we wouldn't lose the games. Even to this day, there's still something a tiny bit wrong about seeing Mario and Sonic together, as they memorably were in the Olympic Games series, of which both Sega and Nintendo have published entries. For me, even that pales to the moment I saw both the Nintendo and Sega logos appear when I first booted up F-Zero GX. Neither of those were the first time though, because just a year after the announcement we get here, with a new Sonic the Hedgehog platformer not only making its debut on a Nintendo platform, but in fact being exclusive to it. It's not on the big boy console just yet. I'm not even sure I can imagine what a Sonic would look like on the N64. It's on the handheld Game Boy Advance. The GBA is a year old, and with capabilities best described as a SNES Pro, it was going to be a very solid option until the DS appears in the middle of the decade. In that respect, this is an opportunity for Sega to fix a few missteps. Sonic had struggled to get out of 16-bit so far. The Saturn never got an entry, maybe for the best, as it's hard to see how X-Treme could have been made into something fun. The Dreamcast Sonic adventures are fondly remembered in hindsight, but when Mario 64 existed were nowhere near enough to save the Dreamcast. With SNES Pro level capabilities, Sonic Advance represents a chance to reset things and make a Sonic 4.
Although, let's hope they didn't make Sonic 4.
Sonic Team are on the case, along with a new team called DIMPS. DIMPS are interesting. They were formed a couple of years earlier by people from SNK, most notably Takashi Nishiyama, a man with founding credits on Street Fighter and King of Fighters, along with the hardware the latter ran on. And if you want, make good 2D things, calling in Golden Age SNK is a smart move. It also makes Sonic Advance a decent convergence, as Sony were a founding investor in DIMPS even though it'd be another 14 years before they published one of their games. DIMPS still exist, by the way. They'll deliver Dragon Ball Xenoverse 3 next year. So all the ingredients are there. A new Sonic Team 2D Sonic game, support from 2D legends on a new and perfectly suited Nintendo console. The only thing that could possibly make this less than perfect is if Nintendo were to launch a 2D Mario game on the same console in the same month. Bugger. We'll get to that though, because first let's take a look how Sonic makes his third-party debut. The first observation is, and it's the GBA's fault, that this sounds like a Nintendo game, not a Sega one. Look, close your eyes and just listen to some of this intro. It sounds like a SNES. Obviously, replicating the Mega Drive signature sound would have been an issue, but even the composition sounds like it's from a Nintendo title. This is further proven when the game attempts an actual Mega Drive track at the point you pick up Invincibility. The other immediate observation is that unsurprisingly, if you're watching this on the big TV, hello snorkers, then 1080p does this game absolutely no favours at all. That should be true of almost any game from the 8 and 16-bit era, but somehow it seems even more here, and I think that's because the resolution, which is lower than even the Master System, has led to this adopting the zoomed-in look of the Game Gear Sonic titles, which may have been an error. The graphic style, like the sound, is also a bit Super Nintendo. If we go back a month and look at Aladdin on the two machines, you can see what I mean in terms of the different natural palettes. If I then add in Mega Drive Sonic and this game, you can see the style is very much one side of the line. The Nintendo owners buying a Game Boy Advance might not even notice. They're seeing what they expect to see after all, but it'd be jarring for the Game Gear owners coming over, and of course with all the other major players out of the game, that was a strong possibility. At least they would be used to handling the zoomed in perspective, although would be confused when the batteries outlived the intro. They'd be the only ones at home. Sonic is way too big on this screen for a game that theoretically has gotta go fast, and it leads to Sonic Advance often feeling more like the next generation of 8-bit Sonic rather than a continuation of the 16-bit style. It's got what I could perhaps best describe as set-piece speed. The quick sections in this, as they were in the Master System games and indeed Sonic 1MD, are kinda hands-off affairs where the skill is in knowing where some of them have traps you'll need to jump off at the end. Most of this game, as those, is played at something of a slower pace than most Sonic players will remember. Speaking of, I assume you've noticed the location we're in. The game begins with Neo Green Hill Zone in a fairly transparent attempt to get new and returning players alike on board. That said, it's not really got Green Hill Zone's design in most places outside those modified graphics. Although in the 8-bit comparisons, there is one point where I managed to go quicker in a set piece than the scrolling allows. But almost as quick as it starts, it's over. The zones only have a pair of acts, although they are larger than most. The boss here is barely worthy of note. You twig within about 2 seconds that Spin Dash is the answer, as it was with at least one classic Killzone boss, and doing so is an entirely skill-free endeavour at that point. If you thought you were playing an 8-bit title at all, scrap Brain Zone will at least fix that with its lovely spotlight effect and parallax scrolling, although the non-contrasting background must have made this a hell of a chore on the original unlit GBA. It's this zone where the set-piece speed really begins, giving you time to notice that the Sonic sprite really does look a bit superimposed. Obviously sprites are always superimposed, that's how sprites work, but sometimes it doesn't even look like Sonic is in the level, and my random pause location suggests a reason why, as Sonic is clipping through the surface he is theoretically stood on. While it's not quite as pre-rendered as that game, it does remind me of the last 8-bit Sonic, the risible Sonic Blast, whose detailed graphics and awful design make it the Sonic answer to Rise of the Robots in more than one sense. One day we may have to look at that one properly. But for now we've got an annoying boss. The resolution defeats you again as he spends a lot of time off screen, making it very difficult to perform the obvious trick of jumping on him in those downswings. The entire lower half of the boss, even when spinning in from the side, is lethal. Casino Paradise Zone. 3 zones in and we've repeated 2. Let's be honest, Secret Base is a bit scrap brain, isn't it? It's not quite selling Sonic to me. Sonic, like Mario, is special. The good ones have a distinct feel that the rank and file platformers never really managed to capture. This though spends a lot of time feeling like any non-Mario Nintendo system platformer. One of the best ones to be sure, but it doesn't quite seem to have it. The Casino Zone in general unfolds like it does in the other Sonics with it, which is so many of them at this point the magazine feels the need to comment on it. I don't have any trouble reaching the boss, who is annoying as the previous one, but in a very different way. This boss is just tedious. Not even difficult because it's just a matter of timing, but it takes me longer than the entire rest of the act. Ice Mountain Zone. Oh no, Sonic's gone for the slippy slidey ice zone. But actually it hasn't, because this is Labyrinth's water zone in disguise, and the ice will make no difference to how the game controls. About halfway through though, I'm not sure I wouldn't rather have the ice. The last thing this Sonic needs are sections that make it slower, but being in water will do that. Sonic's jumping in water has always been annoying, and so it is here. And when parts of this zone are still those quick set pieces, it feels a bit, here's what you could have won. And this is as far as I've got with Sonic, because this boss. Screw this boss. He drops platforms, which at least when controlling the hedgehog are essential for both getting up to deal hits on him, but also your only source of air. You might not have noticed to this point, but compounding the problem is that Sonic's ability to live underwater is massively reduced from about 30 seconds on the Mega Drive to just 18 seconds here. And those go past fast when trying to jump onto fast-moving platforms using underwater Sonic Sluggo physics. I've not yet managed to do it the 8 times required to defeat this boss. And yet, having spent the best part of 1,000 words mostly trashing this game, I still quite like it. Sure, I'd rather have a zoomed out version, sure the set piece speed sections spoil my piss, but most of the other problems are just Sonic things and I could find them in almost any 2D Sonic game. I'm not sure how to feel. This was Sega's chance to really get the Nintendo boys on side. Sonic is a very different game series to Mario, and there's no reason it can't sit alongside and opposed to it by offering a different but still premium feeling experience. I don't think this entry quite sticks that landing. It almost feels like Sega tried to cater at least a little bit to the new people. It may though still be the best handheld Sonic to this date, short of trying to squint at an SMS converted Sonic on Game Gear. Games Master's review praised Sega for choosing to make a new bespoke game for the Game Boy Advance rather than lazily porting a Mega Drive title.
Write that down in your copybook now.
It's probably for the best that they didn't know that lazily porting a Mega Drive game was not only something Sega would later do for the GBA, and by all accounts screw it up, but that it releasing Mega Drive Sonic on everything would pretty much remain a business plan for the quarter century.
But not the Master System ones, of course. That would be crazy.
Still, if you did write that down, you've basically written the review. The rest is basically a description of a Sonic game. All but one screenshot is of things I saw in my first go. The remaining one is from the next zone. There are no pictures of any of the last 4 zones, suggesting that, like me, they did not get there. They call it tough. Other than that boss, I'm finding it, if anything, easier than most Sonic games. It reads, for all the world, like we're about to be litigating our second 73% of the episode, but they actually give it a hefty 92%. It's a surprise, especially as this is the same multi-format magazine that once gave Sonic 2 65% because it was apparently too much like Sonic 1. If that's true, why isn't this game? Over on the Nintendo side, this is exciting. Tetris, obviously, is the Game Boy's poster child, and it should be. But it wasn't a launch title in Japan, and it overshadows what I consider to be a bigger contributor to the long-term viability of handheld gaming. Because in a pre-1989 world where LCD games were about as good as it got, Super Mario Land was an even bigger revelation. A full-sized Mario adventure that controlled at least as well as Super Mario Bros. On your Big Boy NES, but in a handheld with battery life sufficient you could very, very easily complete the game without going near a power source. It was basically a new form factor for proper video games. Tetris may have sold the Game Boy, but I think Mario Land legitimised it. The sequel, while a very short game, was technically even more impressive and remains one of the best ways, on any format, to spend 3 hours. Which is why it's a shame I have to remind you of that copybook from earlier. Super Mario Advance was a launch-era title for GBA, but following on from a successful Super Mario Bros. Remake for the Game Boy Color, it was just a remake of Super Mario Bros. 2.
Doki Doki apathy, if you will.
And they've done the same with Super Mario Advance 2. To be fair, if you're going to remake a game, then why not remake an all-timer that was not at this point on any handheld system in Super Mario World? Still though, it does feel like laziness. A new original Mario platformer on handheld would be great. But while Nintendo would repeat this remake pan 5 times, make numerous spin-off games and even make an original Wario Land, a genuinely new Mario game never happened. It's not quite as bad as all that. They haven't just shipped an old unchanged ROM here as Nintendo would literally do half a decade later on the Wii. Effort has been made to redraw graphics and such. Curiously, even blown up to this size, it doesn't seem to suffer as much from the resolution as Sonic either. Ultimately, Mario World is still Mario World too. It's the expansive, replayable, occasionally frustrating and brilliantly designed game it always was. It's the first great reason Nintendo were propelled dead level with Sega in the UK after a generation trailing behind. I stormed through the Yellow Switch block bonus section and World 1 without even considering coming up for air, even as I attempted to remember the control system. By the end of that world, it's thrown a disturbing number of clever ideas at you already, from enemies hiding behind nets to not entirely blind jumps off collapsing platforms, to Yoshi himself, who of course adds a lot to this game. He can eat apples and enemies. He can shoot out these at other enemies and obstacles. If you get hit, he will run off.
In short, eat, shoot, and leave.
This is the first appearance in a video game for one of the most commonly mispronounced game characters of all time, and he quickly felt like he'd been around forever. The sequel to this game, both on the SNES and GBA, would make him a star, and it wouldn't be long before he was in Super Mario Kart and pretty much anything else going. He's the undoubted star of a game that got universal praise everywhere, including, of course, here. Games Master curiously forget to penalise it for being a remake and give it 95%. On the surface, it's hard to argue with that, and at the time you'd have had to drag your SNES out of a cupboard to legally play it otherwise. Still though, picking a winner in this episode's Sega vs Nintendo clickbait is tricky. Sega could have just ported Sonic 1, in fact they eventually did so, but here they released a new and full-length game that was tailored to the hardware. I'm calling it a draw, but it's only that Super Mario World was a singular game that makes it so. If they'd swapped the order and this was Sonic Advance versus a port of Super Mario Bros. 2, we wouldn't even be discussing it. On the back page, are you a fan of 80s adventure games, especially the weird and wonderful text adventures that represented a genre now mostly lost to time? Might we point you in the direction of the Retro Adventurers podcast? Each month-ish they play a couple of these games to completion and then meet to discuss their experiences and the historic context around them. It's like this show without the magazine, but with people who aren't me. Except of course for episode 45, featuring Apple II commercial and technical showcase Gruds in Space and Spectrum Obscurity Steve Silver #1, in which I joined Jason, who you may know from This Week in Retro, to talk about two games I'd never heard of, much less played. It's a lovely audio treat, and you will discover games you'd never considered before in a genre you may not have thought of in a while. But do think of us in a while. Last Friday of next month should do it. Before then, like, subscribe, do sexy crimes, and if you have it, click the hype button. I'm pretty certain it does nothing, but hey, it's something to do while you listen to a quality audio adventures podcast. See you there.